All right, we are here with Bill Henderson today, and you will know Bill from his work as a singer, songwriter, producer, and engineers in the musical projects like The Collectors, Chilliwack, UHF, and most recently, probably Haida recording artist Terry Lynn Williams Davidson. Chilliwack hits like My Girl, Fly at Night, and What You Gonna Do, among so many others, still receive regular radio play today. Along the way, Bill won both Juno and Genie Awards, as well as having been inducted into the Western Canadian Music Awards Hall of Fame and the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, and being appointed to the Order of Canada on top of that. He's served as past president of SOCAN and the Songwriters Association of Canada and past co-chair of the Canada Music Council. You have been a busy guy, Bill. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Happy to be here.
So do you want to add to the
Add to the accolades.
fill it out a little bit? Tell us, for our listeners who might not, just a little bit about your journey in the biz and how you got where you are today.
Yeah. In 1967, I think it was, we were in San Francisco. We were the Collectors, and we were playing at the Fillmore, and Bill Graham got up and introduced us as the band that was taking music where it was going. How about that? That was amazing, right? And he may well have gotten that from Jerry Garcia, who was the guy, from the Grateful Dead, who introduced us to Bill and got us in there because the Dead had come out and played in Vancouver, and we'd played with them, and Jerry really liked the band. So, it was really interesting because he said that, and we were like a psychedelic band.
Mm-hmm.
and we did the weirder and wilder we could come up with. That's what we put in, right?
Yep.
That's where we were going, and introducing like new things into music, into pop music anyway. And so, but man, did that ever change?
Yeah.
Like right after he said that, the world took a left turn, right? and there we were gasping for air. And meanwhile, the next gig we played there, we played with Albert King,
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't work for us at all.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't work at all. And this whole other thing was happening. The blues thing had always been strong underneath, but was starting to come up, right?
Yeah.
And a whole other approach to music that's, to my mind, almost culminated with the Eagles, with that sort of perfection.
Yeah.
That absolutely perfect, sort of resonating heavily with Americana, with all kinds of American style. With them, it was a lot of country that was in, but pop was very much part of what they did too. Mm-hmm. And so we had all the guys in the band. I mean, we'd all played country, we'd played pop, we'd played everything. We cut our teeth on the American songbook, playing for people who were dining and dancing. So we knew all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we were going like, why are we messing with this shit? Right?
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing the new thing? Right? Why don't we just let's explore? Right? And there were a lot of musicians who agreed with that. And Jerry was one. Jerry Garcia was one. But and Lord knows Frank Zappa, and a number of people were doing that kind of thing. But I'll tell you and on the West Coast, that was happening. At that time, that was happening. And when we went across to the other coast, like in the States, we toured across, went through the Midwest, and then down to, we played New York and Boston and a bunch of places like that, and it was different. It was different.
Yeah.
The American groups there, and the ones coming over from England, who sometimes didn't get much farther than the East Coast. We didn't see so much of them on the West Coast because it was expensive, all of that, a lot of travel. But those bands that came over from England, I mean, they were tight.
Yeah.
They were so tight. They were really like super tight. And all of the people around the what do you call that? That's the Northeast, like the, whatever you call it, the Atlantic coast there in America.
Eastern Seaboard.
Eastern Seaboard. That's the one. That's what they use. Yeah. And it was a lot more R&B. than
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing. The R&B influence was in there more in their sort of advanced bands, in their
Yeah.
not everyone had R&B bands, but these were guys that were wearing funny colors and all that sort of stuff, so like they were quote unquote new,
Mm-hmm.
but they were playing very much R&B.
Yeah.
So our little thing that seemed like it was changing the world was actually just in a little bubble.
Yeah.
And it was West Coast, San Francisco to Vancouver was like a freeway of musicians and music. We were really connected. Even LA was a little beyond that.
Yeah.
They had the Doors, but they were generally a little closer to the bone than we were, not quite so far out. So, that was the beginning of our recording career. The Collectors was our beginning of our recording career. That first album had a 20-minute, one side was 18 minutes long, a continuous piece called the What Love Suite, and it sort of blew people's minds on the West Coast quite a bit. It was really a strong response to it. And in KSAN, which was I think it was the first FM station in the States, so which would make it the first one in North America, they played it like it was a single. They played it like a couple times a day, right?
Wow.
And this thing, and they were huge fans of this thing. So felt like we were, holy crap,
Yeah.
like there was Sergeant Pepper's, and then there was the Collectors.
Yeah.
And continuing the tradition of breaking down the barriers, right? And but people don't think of Chilliwack that way. And those who remember the Collectors, who were actually there, they know what it was. But no one realizes that nowadays that there was this thing going on that was so incredible. At least for us, it was, and for the people who were into that kind of music.
Yeah.
But it went away.
Yeah. I think the landscape of music has changed so much over the years, and it has become so globalized and so much less localized that I don't think you have that. I don't think there is the possibility for that same kind of experience now that would
No,
have
it
been then.
is. It is so globalized. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was a new thing, it would spring from somewhere, and then it would just cover. If it's big, it would cover the world, right?
Yeah.
Fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
So here on the Vocal Lab, we aim to shine a light onto the music industry through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then. So with that in mind, if you were starting your career over again now, what would you do differently?
What I would do is I would stand up for my own self more. And I did it quite a bit in the beginning with the Collectors for my own view of things, the way I thought things should go. But then I realized that I was not on I was being sort of sidetracked by these other elements in the music world. And so I listened more, and I sort of quote unquote behaved myself more and gave up some things I shouldn't have given up. Right. That's what I feel like. I feel like that happened, and it took quite a while to sort of come around. In fact, I couldn't really talk to an audience for a long time because the people behind me, I was representing them, and I could never feel comfortable talking to an audience because I felt like I had to say what they wanted said. Right. I'm not talking about memorizing lines.
Yeah.
I'm talking about having a character that they feel is okay for the front man to have.
Right.
Because they thought of me as a front man. Right. And that didn't change until I started doing, well, actually it changed when we took the band. This was Chilliwack by then, in the 80s. We went and toured with, we went on to the Middle East and Germany for Canadian troops, right? So we went to entertain the Canadian troops and the other troops that were there, and then I remember my sort of where it broke, and it was really interesting. We'd played for the enlisted guys in wherever, maybe it was Germany, it probably was Germany, and then there was a night where we were to play for the officers.
Yeah.
So the officers all something like this, right? Because
Arms crossed.
they know what the fuck's going on, right? And we don't know what you're doing up there, but go ahead. So they, they didn't respond to anything, and I started talking, and I talked, and I talked, and I talked, and I said, I guess this is kind of boring, right? And they kind of went like that. I said, well, you know what? It's really boring. You're sitting on your hands. Yeah. and it just kind of, I realized I can say whatever I want. I can just, if that's the truth, just say it.
Yeah.
Right. And they recognized the truth. They knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
It loosened me up. It loosened them up, and it loosened me up. And I realized that I can have a relationship with an audience if I'm willing to just say what's on my mind, and say what's going on. And that changed everything. And then I went out and did solo stuff. And then it was like, okay, you've got to do everything. You're the drums, you're the bass, you're the singer, you're the storyteller. You're not beholden to anyone. You can make a left turn whenever you need to, and just make it work. Just make it great for the audience. That's all I cared about, was doing that. And so I called on all my resources, and it was really cleansing to do the solo thing, right? And then get back with the band and remember that, okay, I can do this, right? Yeah. Now I have to fit into patterns that people can predict, because they got to play along with me, right? So we got to do that. And there are certain things, and that's okay. You're a musician, figure it out, right? So, but I could and often do with Chilliwack. I just stand there and I start talking, right? And people are laughing behind me. It's okay. I don't care.
Well, I think it's a really interesting concept, and it's one that, like, when I'm teaching, I actually talk about with students and stuff about the concept of a performance persona, which can draw in elements of your, like, real life person, but you also get to choose how much of that you want to share in your performance persona, or whether you want to keep some boundaries around that and keep some of it for yourself. But it always needs to feel authentic, whatever it is, however crafted it may be, and however much it's your voice or the conglomerate voice of all the people driving the machine. It still needs to feel authentic in the moment, because it's you and the relationship with the crowd that's at play there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and if you start reading scripts in your head, they know you're not there.
Yeah.
They know right away. So
yeah,
they're going to give you a little bit of attention. And if you're direct with them, and you're, as you say, I think authentic is a good word, then they might stick around, right?
Yeah.
But they'll give you that bit of time. And if you're not, they won't be around.
Yeah. Yeah. They won't buy a ticket a second time.
No, too boring. Yeah.
All right. So if that's what you would do differently, what did you do right in your career? What would you do all over again the same way?
Well, I was adaptable, and that was good. Like, because as the scene changed, I changed with it, right? And things happened. Like, Ross and I kind of ran the band for a while. Like, we what we did was we went to go from psychedelic. What were we going to go to? I was totally blown away with Albert King that night. I watched him, and I couldn't believe what happened, what he could do with like 3 notes, right? It was just amazing. And I loved it. It was great. So we started to morph into more of a playing band, more of a jamming band. We didn't care so much about structures and coming up with arrangement elements that were really interesting and different and stuff like that. No, that wasn't it. It became a trio, and it was just Ross on drums, Claire on sax, flute, and bass, and me on guitar and bass. And we would switch the bass around, but and we, this was our response to the changes that were happening. So that flexibility was important, and that system worked really well. What we did, we jammed. We were a jamming band. We didn't know. Well, there were about 3 songs that we knew we were going to play in our set, but we didn't know in what order. And I'd flip into some old country song just because I felt like it, and Claire would do whatever. He was so incredibly malleable and still is to this day. Like I've gone back to working with him again because I miss that.
Yeah.
There's not many people who can do that. He's there with you every moment, and every nuance. He's feeling it and responding to it, and then you're responding to him, and it's like magic happening, right? It's communication between people, and so that flexibility was important, and then it became more pop, and it was the Eagles. So we did Fly at Night, and we did Baby Blue, and stuff like that. And then it was the '80s, and we did, and Ross was gone, and Brian was there, and we did some really amazing records, and My Girl Gone Gone Gone, and I Believe, and stuff like that. What You Gonna Do, and so again, that was being flexible and responding to the situation. But yeah, it's a real art in your life, isn't it? To just like, okay, respond, but be yourself.
Yeah.
Change, but be the same. What part changes, what part stays the same, So I would just go, oh shit, just give it up. Right. Okay. Yeah. Now with Brian, okay, now we're doubling parts, and they have to be so perfect you can't even tell it's a double. That's how good they have to be.
Yeah.
And if you got it good for this whole phrase, but one note's off, don't think you're going to get away with that. Don't think having it a little fraction different, you're going to get away with that. No way. It's got to be perfect. Brian and I became producers and went around producing other people, and we did the punching on the machine, not the engineer. Because we knew precisely where we were, and the engineer knew approximately where we were, but we knew exactly. So, we would do that, and we created records that had that level of perfection in them. I remember one engineer saying early on, when a guy that I'd worked with for years actually, and we're doing this, and Brian, he's doing this. It's on this album we made called Breakdown in Paradise, a song called Guilty. And he played a vibraphone solo on Guilty. And then he doubled it. And he doubled it so precisely, and it had to be exactly right. And I bought it. I bought where he was going. I went, good. Let's do that. No, we're going to punch it. Do it again. Punch it right here. This is before we got to punching it ourselves. Punch it right here, just like that, right? I tell the engineer everything. And at a certain point, we had done a lot of records together, and he said to me, "Why are we doing this? It's fine. What's the problem?" And I said, "Yeah, I know, but listen to the sound. Because when you get that level of perfection, there still is little tonal differences that make the stereo field expand and contract and do all this kind of the sound becomes it's like you can't get that with a machine.
Nope.
Because whatever you set it up to do differently than the original track, it does it consistently. Even when you put it random, it's random consistent. And it just, you can't get, there's only one way to get it, and that is to be there doing it, and with yourself, with that double track, and listening and going, okay, is that doing it? Is that creating what we want? Right. And always listening. Yeah. So anyway,
I think that level of perfection that you're talking about too, it's been so computerized in current day music with like everything goes through auto-tune, Melodyne, everything. Whereas then you were getting that level of perfection orally, like by doing it again and again until it was a perfect double. But it has so much more texture when you do it naturally than when you do it with a computer. And I will always and forever prefer the real double over the auto-tuned stuff. But that's personal preference.
Well, I agree with you. Yeah.
Now I'm not specifically asking for people so much as the relationships, but you can talk about it however you want to. What have been the most important relationships in your career?
Yeah, with my fellow musicians, they're like that's totally important. As we shared a lot, and I have had relationships with musicians that are fractious. Not that we've actually openly fought, but we did not like each other. He didn't like me and I didn't like him. And we worked together for years. And then there were other musicians that were so warm and so willing to work with what you come up with, and then you work with what they come up with, and there's this thing that happens, and it's really a nice thing, and so that's been really important. Another thing that's been really important is the business people around me too, the managers especially. Like, I always needed somebody to sort of kind of father figure type of thing, and I found those people, and they were important to me, and for whatever it's worth, it was important to me. I needed it, and it wasn't always managers. Sometimes it was record company people, and I had some wonderful relationships with record company people. And as much as many times I've railed against record companies publicly, but that's not the people so much as what the lawyers have created in contracts that are considered, oh, well, this is what you sign. I'm sorry, this is what you sign. This is what we do. And until you're, when you're Elvis or Bruce Springsteen, then you can tell us what you want. It's like, Jesus. There's so much stuff baked into those contracts that's unfair to artists. It's not about fair. It's about money, right? That's what it's about. And they're investing money, so I can understand that. And we always used to make records with record companies, and nowadays you don't have to do it. But we did have to. And if we wanted to make another record, we better have a hit on this one. And so we better talk to them about what they're looking for, and we better try and work with that. And because we had to have that relationship, because they're putting money out. If they're not getting their money back, they're like, bye.
I mean, that's business.
Yeah, it's business, and you might not have the scratch to record a record. So you need them. But you don't need them as much as you used to. You need them for push more now than
more than creation.
And then my relationship with my wife was really important for the music. I tell a lot of people, I've said many times, I've done many songwriter workshops, and I said, I talk about how you don't know what you're doing. You do it, but you don't know what it is a lot of times. And so when my wife would hear me playing something, because I usually wrote in the kitchen, I like the company, and she's making food or whatever, and so I'm just kind of writing. I'm playing my guitar, and something comes up, and I'm playing it, and she goes, "Oh, that's nice. What is that?" And I'd go, "I don't know," but I'd start working on it, right? And because she recognized something, and a lot of times I could not tell. So I really valued that, and I really valued the other of the two things she said to me that were ultra important. The other one was, I liked it better before. Because we have to craft our songs. I mean, every once in a while you get a gift and you don't have to do any crafting. It's just like it comes out, and that's really amazing. I've had those and I love that. But most of the time you have to do some crafting, right? So, and it becomes a matter of, how do you get out of your own way? How do you keep from massacring a great idea? And how do you even know when you massacred it? I didn't. Most of the time at first, I'd be like, I do all the, I can do this, and it's really fancy and it's really cool, and everybody likes to hear that, and boom, 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 boom. And she'd go, I liked it better before.
Because you can overwork it and take the magic away.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a light touch that's really important, and you can't always do it the same day. I got a song right now. We recorded 2 songs a few weeks ago. We've been playing them for almost a year. Well, we haven't been playing for a year because of COVID, so I don't know, 3/4 of a year, something like that. And one of them was written, I started it in 1974. And I always loved this. I had a first line and I had a title. Maybe it was a couple lines. I think it was a couple, and a title and these really nice chords and a nice melody and all of that. And I did not know what to do with it. I could never finish it. I tried, never. And a couple of years ago, it started circulating in my head again.
Yeah.
It's kind of miraculous how that happens. And it just kept going. And COVID and recent circumstances, social circumstances, kind of focused me for it. And I finished it, and we're recording it. And so it's really, you don't always know what to do with your song. And that was a case in point. That took like 40 years or whatever it was, almost 40 years. Yeah.
So to all the budding songwriters out there, don't ever throw away your ideas.
No.
Sometimes they take 40 years to come to fruition. I had that experience. I mean, I think for me, it was about 15 years from start to finish. But it was just stuck in the middle. Yeah. But finally it got finished. But you got me beat. We do the math on that. I think it's actually closer to
48. It's 48 years.
Yeah. Well done, sir.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't know. And then other times, you write something and you realize that you've made a basic error.
Yeah.
And you can go back, there's good stuff, but you made a real fundamental error, and you can back up, and a lot of times you can adjust it. I wrote this one song. It's another one that we just recorded of the two songs, and it was a response to a politician, the then premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, who was trying to characterize British Columbians as people who didn't care about their oil and gas, and were just out of spite trying to stop these pipelines, and she pitted Albertans and British Columbians against one another for political purpose.
Yeah.
It made me so angry. And I was sitting there with my guitar one day, and I just swept up on just a plain old G chord, and started going, saying, I was kind of going, the way you say to someone who's being really unreasonable, and you say, all right, okay, all right. Here's what we should do, right?
Yeah.
So the song goes, all right. Can we try to make it all right? And so I was saying that, and then I started saying things like, if orcas survive in the Sailor Sea, it ain't gonna hurt your economy. And if water and air's fresh and clean, it won't take a job from a working man.
Yeah.
That was my first verse. And all right. Can we try to make it all right? And then I realized that the negativity of that was going to make it difficult for people, right? To get next to it. Mm-hmm. And I also realized that there were many other things going on in the world that are problematic, where we need to change, and things are tough, things are heating up, all of that. And so I ended up changing it to, all right, we're going to make it all right. Mm-hmm. And if this, then that changes, if the orcas survive, it's not going to be a problem. That's not a problem. Mm-hmm. If the environment's in good shape, that's not a problem, right? We're going to make it all right. It's going to be good. And now we play it for people. It's the last song the second last song in the evening. And a lot of times the audience, they're just got their arms on their shoulders and swaying. Yeah. And they're going, all right, we're going to make it all right. And they go, because it just makes them feel better. Yeah. And what are we here for, right? Yeah. So why not make things comfortable for people if you can do it? So
Well, and if that, especially because I think songwriters are storytellers. And I think if we can position things in a way that brings people in rather than pushes them away, you're going to accomplish a lot more with your storytelling,
yeah,
right?
that's it.
Yeah.
That's an old piece of wisdom.
Yeah.
Not, and I'm not saying you're old.
But you're not saying I'm old either.
I knew your mom and dad, I knew them in 1964.
Didn't you and my mom
3,
go to UBC
2.
together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was in the music department. I was in the music department. Your dad by then was gone from the music department. I don't know if he
He
spent
was
time
never at
there or not.
UBC.
He was
No,
never
he
at.
was never.
Okay.
No, he went to UCLA for a while, but he was never in school up
Yeah.
here.
But I knew him because of the music industry, and because he and Hoot and Griff worked together so much, and Hoot was when my first year there, I think he was still in the school.
Yeah,
I believe so. There were some really great musicians in there, and so I knew these people. So it's amazing to talk to you. It's kind of cool.
Our families go way back.
They
I
go
actually
back.
have footage of an episode. I believe it's the Let's Go show that my parents worked on, and Griff and Hoot and all those guys worked on, and the Collectors were the musical guest
Right.
on that
Right.
show. So there you are.
Your dad was the host.
Yeah.
Right.
I think so.
I've got that video.
Or maybe it was his TV special that you got. I can't remember. I've got a couple of them, but yeah, there you guys are. And I have to tell you that you were responsible for more record needles in our house than anyone else, because when Josh was about 2, he was fascinated with the song My Girl.
Yeah.
And he would he would literally in diapers, and he would pretend to snap. He thought he was snapping. He would flick his thumbs like this, and he couldn't even really talk yet. And he'd go gong gong, gong gong, gong gong. And he would go into the living room and he would turn the record player on and then just smash the needle down because he wanted to hear gong gong.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
I had to buy a lot of record needles.
Yeah. That song with those words, it's something a kid of that age could actually get into. Gong 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 gong. Yeah.
So I mean, speaking of you, being at UBC, and so you obviously, musicians come in all shapes and sizes in terms of being having different levels of formal education.
Yeah.
You have your formal education. You got your bachelor's degree from UBC in music. No, you got some of your bachelor's degree. Yeah, I have one of those too. Some of my bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
But so you know your way around your theory and all of that. How has that impacted your work? Or has it not?
Yeah, no, it has definitely impacted it big time. Well, first of all, I got a lot of perspective from it, and only by going through that program, or partway through that program, would I have ever heard of John Cage.
Yep.
And ever thought of a concept of music that happens by chance, or music that's just completely different than anything we considered to be music before, right? And so that opened up my mind. And so for the Collectors, I think for Claire too, because he took the program as well. I think he did graduate, maybe not, because we went down. We were going to go and record, and he couldn't continue. I think that's what happened. But anyway. Yeah, we both sort of picked up on some of these things, and Charles Ives with this, 2 keys at once. That's interesting. And
not super listenable, but interesting.
No, but interesting, exactly. So there's a limit to what you can do with these things, but it opens your mind, right? So it did that, and then it confirmed my the grid in my mind, because I already had a grid that was about intervals and harmony. And I had that grid from being a guitar player, from observing, the sounds of different intervals and stuff, and realizing that if I knew what that note was, then I would know what that one was and what that one was. So relative pitch, right?
Yeah.
And so it confirmed that and developed it further. So those things, and the other thing that it did, which is not necessarily so great, is it gave me more of an intellectual view of music. And that's where we part with blues. That's where we part with dance. It's you can still use your intellect, but it is not the focus, right? It is not the focus. But it became the focus for me, because one of the things about universities that I find really almost tragic is they are so wrong. They're so about, about that. And the mind, the intellect loves that. The logic loves that. Right, wrong. Music's not there.
No.
Right?
Music exists in the gray areas.
Yeah. So that wasn't so helpful, and it was an impediment for a while until I realized, and I just dropped it, right? I just dropped it. Because I think the first song where I really did that, and I wasn't thinking about that particularly, but was Lonesome Mary. And Lonesome Mary, I wrote in the time it takes to sing it. And it happened after I'd done about 2 hours of work creating a new garden for May, my wife.
Yeah.
Digging up in a place where that was full of roots and all kinds of stuff, and big trees around it and everything. So it was really hard work. And I loved it, right? I worked really hard and everything, and I got really tired. And I came back into the cabin we were living in. I just picked up my guitar and just played this great big D chord, and it just felt so good. Just and then I kept the D drone going, and I slid the triad up so that it was a D on top, but it was actually a B flat chord. Yeah. Right. So that's the third, right? So and then slide it down a half tone, Mary, down a whole tone, another whole tone, Mary, yeah, back down to D, right? Yeah. And then the thing just poured out. And I never thought in that whole process. I didn't think. It just happened, right? Yeah. And I just felt good. It was physical. And the other thing I learned doing that was, many times I played songs for the band that I wanted the band to play, and they felt great when I wrote them, and I played them for the band, and they didn't feel great when I played them for the band, and they didn't think they felt great either, and no, we didn't do it. So here's another one where I felt great about it, and I went, now this time, I'm going to play this song as long as it takes for me to fully memorize my body position and everything I'm doing physically. And just keep doing it, check it out. What's going on? How am I sitting? How am I holding the guitar? All these things, right? So then when I went to play it for them, I just assembled myself. I had this in my mind. I had to do this. So I did it. And then I played the song, and it worked. Of course, the song was probably a lot better than the ones I played for them before anyway.
It's a great song.
I like that song, but yeah.
I think that's such an important aspect of performance. Whether it's singing it to the guys in your band or whether it's doing it on stage, that it's really unlikely that the magic is going to happen for the first time on stage, for instance, if you haven't practiced it
really
ahead of time. Yeah. So that concept of memorizing how it sits in your body, I think is a really important aspect of making music, and it's one that we don't really talk about a whole lot.
Right. It's really interesting hearing what people who've written songs have to say about them, right? And I can't remember what book it is. There's one book I have where it's basically just short interviews with lots of people who've written great songs, and so many of them you ask them about a few songs and they tell you about them, and then you get to the big one, the really big one. You say, so how did this one happen? I don't feel like I even wrote that song. It just happened. You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to, in songwriting workshops, I try to tell that to people, like, this is, and of course, you don't know kind of what that is until you've experienced it, and you might think all kinds of things. And so it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to start writing a great song but it's about not being in your own way, for sure. It is about that. Yeah.
I've talked to other people, and I've certainly had this experience myself, where it feels like that it's not coming from me, that I'm just the conduit for it to come out into the world.
That's it.
And I think the other piece of that is that you have to answer the muse. She doesn't always call twice.
Yeah. You got to be there.
So if you get that great idea, or what could be a great, maybe it's a shit idea, but maybe it's a great idea. If you wake up with that in the middle of the night, you're not going to remember it in the morning if you don't sing it into your voice memos, or note it down, or do something so that you can access it again later.
Yeah. Have you done that?
I have. I don't write a whole lot anymore, but in the period of my life when I was doing a lot of writing, I missed out on some potentially great, potentially terrible, who knows, ideas, because I didn't. I thought, oh, I'll remember that. I'm too tired. I'll remember that. And I got into the habit eventually of sleeping with a notebook beside my bed. It was before the period of time of iPhones and whatnot. I actually ultimately got myself a little digital voice recorder that I would sleep with beside my bed, so that when something did occur to me in the middle of the night, I could literally just sing it into the voice recorder and then turn it over and go back to sleep. And I think there's a piece of that when you're in that mode of creativity fosters creativity.
Yeah.
So like when I say I don't really write much anymore, because I'm out of the habit of doing it. But when I was doing it, I was doing a shit ton of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think you learn that you have to show up when she calls.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's also interesting what happens in dreams too, because like I always, I'd have these dreams about music, and that just sounded amazing to me, and I could never remember them either. I always thought, how could I forget that? But you don't remember. So I got, this was in cassette days. I had a cassette machine, the play, record, hit the two buttons at once. And so I ended up putting one beside my bed, and one night I got this wonderful idea, and the machine was there, so I did that, and I sang it into the machine, and thought, this is great. And then I played it in the morning, and it was like I guess I didn't show up for the Muse after all. So now I just get up and grab the guitar if it really feels that great. A lot of times it'll be like something to do with a song that I'm already writing, and something will come up and like, wow, that fits really well, and it's actually worth it to get up and use the voice memos or whatever and just sort of play it and listen and get it.
I mean, I've also heard a differing perspective on that. My brother says, if you don't remember it the next day, it wasn't worth remembering.
Yeah.
So, each to their own.
Yeah, really.
But
who knows? Yeah. We just work with what we get, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about the voice a little bit. The voice is an incredibly important instrument, and it's a bit different from mechanical instruments that live outside your body. So how do you care for your voice? What's your sort of daily routine? What's your typical pre and post show routine to keep? Because I have to say, you are at a very respectable age and you have a voice that sounds like you're still 30 years old.
Hmm.
And that doesn't come without putting some work into it.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true, and I have done that. I think also I've been lucky genetically in that regard. Um, but yeah, I for years I went out on the road and especially when we were really getting into more sort of powerful music, I'd go out, I'd blow my voice in 2 nights.
Mm-hmm.
By the third day, I couldn't talk. I remember my road manager phoning, and I was still in bed, and the phone rang. I picked it up and went, "Uh-oh." That's right. And he went, "Oh shit."
Yep.
And yeah, I got so I couldn't even talk. So I just the 80s was a really bad time for me for that. It was
Mm-hmm.
really, really hard. I just couldn't make it work. So, I took lessons from different people,
Mm-hmm.
and it seemed to help a bit, but didn't make a huge difference. And then in the last, 20 years, I have taken lessons from Camille, right?
Yep.
My daughter Camille, who teaches voice, and she
Fantastic voice teacher.
yeah, she's good, and she helped a lot, and I got the Seth Riggs book, and I was
Yep.
working with that, and so I don't have the determination to do it every day.
Mm.
So I try to do it a week before a gig, start it a week before a gig, and
Mm-hmm.
then work every day. But only I just like half an hour. That's what I
Yep.
do, right? And I got a series of exercises. I do the exercises, and then bingo, I'm back doing other things. But it stabilizes things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't smoke.
Mm-hmm.
I smoked for about 2 or 3 years in my 20s, and that was it. And I think that's really helpful for depending on what kind of voice you want. But
Yeah.
mine's a clear type voice. It's that type of voice, and it doesn't want smoke.
Yeah.
It doesn't want drink.
Yeah.
So I don't hardly drink at all. These days, one beer a day because I like a really good quality beer.
Yeah.
So and I get lots of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I often sing and play my guitar, so I'm not working on my voice, but I'm using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really probably about it. Yeah, there are some things that I've learned that are useful, and when I'm doing my exercises, I employ those things.
Yep.
I make sure I try to pay attention all of the time while I'm doing it because it's so easy to get bored and just have your mind drifting. And yes, I did all the scales and arpeggios, but
Yep.
I wasn't paying attention. You got to pay attention, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So that's about it.
And over the years, you may have spent a little bit of time on the road.
Yes.
And I think from afar, that looks like this super glamorous rock star experience. And from the inside, it can be quite a different thing. It's not necessarily all fancy hotel rooms and crazy green M&M riders, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also sleeping on a bus crossing the prairies in December or playing 50 shows in 2 months
Yeah,
or
right.
whatever.
Stupid stuff. Yeah.
Those things can have some pretty harsh realities for singers around vocal fatigue and that kind of thing. What have you learned over the course of your career that makes for better uh, vocal longevity as you're
Yes.
on the road?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Number one, I only do about two gigs in a row, maybe three at the
Yeah.
most. Generally, I go out, fly someplace. We fly somewhere. We do one gig. We come home.
Yeah.
And then we maybe go out the next weekend or whatever. 10 days later, do another maybe two. Come home.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, the I'm in a position where I can ask for certain things from a presenter. So 2 nights of hotels, not one, 2.
Yeah.
So we get there, I leave in the afternoon from Vancouver and get there in the evening, generally early evening. We can have a dinner, then we sleep, get up in the morning, we have breakfast, and early sound check. If I can get it, noon. So we go in there at noon, we do our sound check, get everything the way we want it, and we're out of there by 1:30 at the latest. It usually takes us a half an hour to do a sound check, but depends.
Yeah.
So, and then we go back to the hotel, and then I eat my big meal. I don't eat my big meal before I go on stage. I eat my big meal at 2:00 or 3, and I make sure I got plenty and stuff that's going to last, right? And so, and then we nap. We each have our own room. We don't room with anybody else. And I go and I nap. I'll nap for an hour and a half, something like that. Then I'll do my vocal exercise. When I get up, I'll maybe change my strings, whatever, that kind of thing. I'll wake up a bit, and then I'll do my vocal exercises, right? And then I may get a little bite to eat in a hotel restaurant, or maybe it's time to head to the show. We get to the show an hour before at the minimum, an hour to an hour and a half before we're on stage. Then the rider is set up so that you could get buns and a little bit of sandwich meat and a little bit of cheese, whatever, and you can make a little sandwich, right? So you just top up before the show. No alcohol before the show. And we do our vocal warm-ups together then in the trailer or whatever. So we've done that. We're ready. We joke around. Jerry gives a shit and we give it back to him, and we all have lots of fun. And we enjoy, that's us coming together as a unit. And that's super important. You can go out on stage and not know who you're playing with if you're not careful, right? So we just, we're in each other's face for a while, for like a half an hour or 40 minutes before we go on stage. Then we go up and we're ready to go. And those things are as ironclad as I can make them. I fight for them, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's so important to know what those things are. And I'm sure it took years of doing it to determine what those things are that made the differences for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of them to be in a position in your career where you could ask for the things that mattered, because young artists can't do all of those things necessarily.
But young artists have got a ton of energy.
Absolutely.
It's a little different when you're on the other end of the age scale.
But I think, I think it's really important to know what those things are and make a point of making them a priority, because that has contributed to the longevity of your career. Right?
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And you can, that's the thing, is to be able, I think a lot of bands feel that what they're doing is important, and that's great. That's how you should feel. And you should just really respect that. And just make sure you've got a situation that's working for you as much as possible. And yet there'll always be things that are trying to make it hard for you, and there'll be people who don't care and they don't do what they're supposed to do for you, et cetera, et cetera. But you just do your best to make things good, make it work for you. Yeah.
What else do you think contributes to the longevity of a career as an original artist?
Yeah. Maybe a need to do it. I think, I know that there's many, many people who never had a music career who have more talent than I do. I've got talent. I'm not belittling myself. I do, but there's people with a lot more. And some of them are not doing music. They're not in the music industry. Some of them because they had choices.
Yeah.
I celebrate the fact that I did not, because I couldn't do anything else, right? and I either just couldn't do it, or I was too bored with it to put any time into it. So, it wasn't going to work. I tried being a bricky's helper. I worked in a stock auction. I did various things at various times because I had to make money, but, including playing the American Songbook and, Hotel Vancouver,
Mhm.
whatever floor up the top there that they had that was such a big deal, and we had to do those songs, and I was like totally bored. This is a gig where you could play Happy Birthday 3 times a night,
Yeah.
and that stuff, and yeah. I mean, we'd start laughing at the beginning of a song and we couldn't stop. So we were a strolling trio. So we were mobile. So
Yeah.
we'd back into a corner and sort of lean over our guitars and shake. And then we'd get it together. We'd come back out into the room. So if you are easily satisfied, you might not have a career because there's so many things that are easier than what we do. You got to want it.
I've heard my brother put it in a way that I loved the language he used for it. He said, if there's anything else that you can do, and the unspoken subtext was anything else you could do and still find like happiness in your life.
Yeah.
If there's anything else that you can do, you should do that.
You'll have a better time.
Yeah.
It just is.
And if there's anything else that you can do that's going to make you as happy as this, then you probably don't have the drive it's going to take to be successful at this.
Well, that's it. And that's kind of what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's you have to need it.
Yeah.
You have to, because if you don't have other options and you need it for your soul that badly, some people do, then that's kind of how you get there, right? Yeah, that's it. And I think that, a lot of that reminded me of something that, you hear about a lot of times where, famous actors or whatever, I knew some, and they'd have to puke before they went on stage because they're so nervous and upset and so feeling like they're not going to do a good job and that they're going to blow it all over the place, and then they go out and they're freaking amazing.
Yep.
Because they have to be. It's the only way to survive. They have to be that good, or they're going to feel really horrible.
Yeah.
So they really work hard. People in that with that kind of response to it, and yeah.
Thanks so much for joining in today. That was the first half of the interview with Bill Henderson. And I can't wait for you guys to tune in again on Thursday, where you'll get to hear the second half of my interview with Bill. He's got so much more to share. We'll see you then.